Welcome to SKIO Academy's Educator Sessions. Today is March 25th, I think, of 2019. Not that that really matters because these are applicable anytime. Today we're talking about middle school. So there's a few of us here today. We're talking about that. And then you can always watch the recording or you can share it with your friends if you're here today and this has been helpful for you. We do these every month for the school year. So we're starting usually in September and we'll be finishing out in April or May. No, April. That'll be our last educator session for the actual school year. So welcome. I'm glad you guys could join us. And today we're going to be talking about middle school. So we'll start right in on there. Just before we really get into it, I just want to kind of let you know where I'm coming from as a premise. We always start these webinars a similar way. But with middle school, there's a lot of emotions around it. And I just wanted to start by saying, middle school is a time to be found. It's a time when we are wrestling with ourselves, our kids. We're not in middle school anymore, but our children are. Some of them are. And they're really wrestling, and we need to help them. So let's remember that. It's kind of reminds me of dealing with children from difficult places that really they're the victim. They're the ones who are struggling as much as we're struggling when they argue with us and pick on us and do things to us that seem wrong. They're really struggling too. And that's what we're here for as parents, is to help them. So let's get started with our scripture today. As always, our scripture is a portion of a scripture. This one's from Ephesians. Paul is writing to the church in Ephesus, and he was giving them kind of his last hoorah right at the end of the chapter there, just kind of like, oh, don't forget all these things. Kind of like when we're leaving our house and our kids are there and we say to them, oh, don't forget to feed the dog before you go to bed tonight, and don't forget to go to bed on time, and don't forget to lock the doors, and don't forget to do all these things. That's what Paul's doing to the church in Ephesus at this point, is he's listing out all these things. He's like, be angry, but don't sin about it. Don't give the devil an opportunity. Don't steal. Don't say bad things. Don't grieve the Holy Spirit. I mean, he's just going through all these lists, and in the middle of the list is this very quick, very important requirement: be kind one to another, or be kind to one another. I always remember it this way, one to another. I don't know why. Just be kind, and it wouldn't be in there if it wasn't important for us to do. It wouldn't be in there if it wasn't something that didn't come naturally to us. Be kind. And in the middle school years especially are really important to remember that our goal is to be kind, that we need to be kind to each other. And middle school is a really hard time to be kind to each other, especially parents to children, children to children, all the way around. So many problems come up in those years. So just trying to emphasize that if you're a middle schooler learns nothing in middle school except how to be kind to people who are being mean, or to people who just seem a little different or a little off or are struggling, then you've succeeded. That's ultimately the goal of those years. If you can teach that, then you can just sit back. Your job is over. You did a great job. All right, so today, as we dive into middle school, we're going to just go through some of our basic definitions. What is middle school? What is the purpose of middle school? And how do we help our middle schoolers thrive? So what is it we're actually dealing with? What makes it so special? What makes it so special? Well, middle school is hard emotionally. It's really hard emotionally. For the first time, your student is coming up against this idea that not only does he have to master the material, but he only has so much time in which to do it. That all of a sudden there's a deadline. Whereas before it was like, well, we'll get around to memorizing those multiplication tables. It'll happen. We started in second grade and we got plenty of years to do this, and it's going to happen. And then in middle school, all of a sudden you're hit with the fact that my kid's trying to learn pre-algebra and he still doesn't know what 6 times 3 is. He still has to skip count to get there. And it's like, oh, nuts. Now you're hitting up against this expectation that he's already had that done, and maybe he doesn't. And so now it's becoming very time sensitive. They're starting to think about the why and not just the what. They're starting to wrestle with the big ideas, but their brain hasn't quite developed the ability to really truly wrestle with them and to see all different sides of them. So that becomes an emotional burden. They're starting to get to the point where their memory retrieval increases, where they've memorized all these things or they learned all these things, but now we're asking them to remember it, to pull it out of that file system. So there's a lot of extra requirements on them or burdens on them that they might not have had in previous years. It's like homeschooling in February, where you hit February as a homeschooler and either you look at it and you're going, man, we're doing great this year. We are like getting everything done and it's been amazing and we've gone and done fun things and our to-do list is getting done every day and it's just great. Or you hit February and you're like, man, we have done awful. We have to play catch up for the next 18 months just to get done what we were supposed to do this year. You know what? Let's just call it quits for the year and we'll just start again fresh in August. And unfortunately for middle school, you can't really just call it quits when you're halfway through it or when you're 3/4 of the way through it. Fortunately, though, you do have 2 years to do what most people could do in one, what most kids could do in a shorter amount of time. You do have some time there. It's actually kind of a buffer, and we're going to talk about that a little more as we get going. Middle school is also hard physically for obvious reasons. Anybody who's gone through middle school knows that you've got high hormones, which interfere with logic and the ability to think and reason. Our bodies are quickly growing. If you've got boys like I do, they're eating all the time. They're constantly hungry. And this hunger that they experience really interferes with their learning. Like if they're sitting at the table and they're hungry, then you can bet that they are not focusing on learning about Charlemagne. It's just not happening. They're thinking about that orange on the counter over there, or what are we having for lunch? Okay, I have a kid who asks me what we're having for lunch every night after dinner. Like he wants to know, what are we eating the next day and the next day, and when can I eat again? Like this is his focus. His brain is literally going towards that, and it takes all my energy to get him to focus on something else. We're awkward in middle school. We have a lack of control, causing frustration. I mean, everybody's seen those middle school boys. Their arms and legs are like as long. Like I think of it as Elastigirl with her arms and legs all hanging out, and as she's pulling them in, and they just can't control themselves. They're very awkward. They're learning how to control their body. Middle school is like a purgatory. It's like we're stuck between the world of the child and the world of the adult. We're in between childhood and adulthood. 1 minute, your middle schooler is sitting there and he's talking to you about the cave in Plato and about how people are seeing puppets or shadows on the wall and how they don't understand salvation, what the real world looks like because they've only ever been fed this, and how profound that is, and what such a great idea that is, and that's like Christ coming to us, and he's talking all these great things, and the next minute he's wrestling with his little brother over who gets the last Oreo out of the container. Like the kid's gonna knock that little kid over and steal the Oreo, and you're standing there going, what? Are you serious? Are you serious here, people? Okay, we were just talking about Play-Doh, and now you're going to wrestle over an Oreo? Like, where is that man that I just saw? My husband and I have this joke where our sons will do something at this stage, and we'll be like, "Oh, there's the man," and then like 10 minutes later, they'll do something else, and we'll go, "And there's the boy," because there's this wrestling in between. Like they're not quite in high school yet. But they're not in elementary anymore. They're not an adult, but they're not a child. So you've got this, they're stuck in like this middle section, gray area almost. And it's a real struggle. It's hard to love these walking zombies, right? But they don't really like themselves either, usually when they're acting like that. And this is such a great moment for us to show the love of Christ. We want to love the unlovable. It's also a great time for us to show our children how to do the same thing, right? Because not only do they not love themselves, but they usually have siblings or friends who are in the similar circumstances. And we can point that out and say, look, you don't like this about yourself. He probably doesn't like that about himself either. Let's be kind and compassionate. Okay, so what purpose does middle school serve? If you've got all this emotional and physical stuff happening, well, why do we even bother? Why don't we just hibernate for those 2 years and just wait for the storm to pass? Let's just let our boys sleep all the time and eat all the time, and we'll just wait, or we'll lock our girls into a room and be like, you know what? When you are a reasonable adult, come on out and we will talk about great things again. But we can't do that. That's a great way to kill your relationship with your child, for one. But that's not what God calls us to do, right? So what purpose can we get out of middle school? Time. It really is a gift of time. The fact of the matter is, your child in middle school, as far as schooling goes, they don't really get a whole bunch more grammar or facts put into them in these years. This is the time they have the time to show that they've mastered what they've already been presented. They learn how to hone some of those skills in writing. They learn how to pick up any of those things they might have dropped in math before, like finalizing those multiplication tables and getting truly ready, learning some study skills and how to take notes and really prepare themselves for high school. Now, there are some kids who really don't need 2 years of middle school in order to do that. So they have this immense amount of time to just kind of really hone those skills. Some kids need 2-3 years, and that's okay. Okay, that's what middle school is. It's that gift of time before really getting into the seriousness of high school and applying for colleges and doing SATs and all of that really great fun stuff. But it's much more adult-like behavior and material than what they've ever seen before. Middle school also gives them the ability to make decisions. They can learn how to make good decisions and learn what happens when they make bad decisions. There's really no other time in their life where they're going to be able to be in a position to make a decision that has a small consequence, right? If your child makes a bad decision in middle school, they're not driving a car. Most likely nobody's life is on the line, right? There's no drugs and alcohol involved, most likely. It's usually a smaller decision, and therefore the consequence is smaller and a little more manageable, and you're usually still close enough to where you can step in and help if there's something goes really bad. And they get to see that cause and effect comes in play as they're starting to reason why did the Civil War happen? Or why did the colonies revolt against England? Or why did we fight in Jerusalem, the Muslims, during the Crusades? Why did we do all these things in history? As they're wrestling that, they're also wrestling, why did I fight my little brother for an Oreo? Does that not sound stupid? It sounds stupid, right? It sounds stupid to him, even though he did it, right? And now he can look through those decisions and look at the consequences and go, that was really not the smartest thing I've ever done. He can learn from that before it gets really big. But if we don't let them fail, if we don't let them make those decisions now, then it's going to become even more difficult for them to have the harder consequences later. And love, we kind of touched on this already. It gives them a chance to love the unlikable. They're unlikable in that moment, yet we still love them. They can take that love that we give them and they can love other people as well. So they get a chance to have time to master some of the concepts that they've seen in the last years to really get ready for high school. They get a chance to make decisions where the consequences are bad for them, but really not devastating. And they get a chance to learn how to love. So that's the purpose that I can see in middle school. Obviously, you might see something totally different, but this is what I've seen with my own kids and with other people's kids as we work towards high school. Any questions so far? If you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and talk, but most people like to just put it in the chat box, which is totally okay. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in there now, or you can do it later. So how do we help? How do we help our middle schooler? First, you can do this. Really, you got this. They're in middle school. They're hard to live with. I get that, but you can do it, right? First, examine premises. Like I thought about this before, and I thought, well, what kind of attitude do we go into with middle school? Like when I think about my own personal middle school behavior or personal middle school experience, it's not a pretty picture, to quote the genie from Aladdin. We watched that recently, you can probably tell. It's really not. It's not something I ever want to repeat, and I don't want my kids experiencing that ever. And so I think, does middle school have to be like that? A lot of people say yes, because the physical changes, the emotional changes, and the being stuck in purgatory, and all of the different things we just talked about. They say, oh yeah, it has to be like that. But you know what? It really doesn't. It really doesn't. When my kids were really little, I have all boys, 5 boys. I love having boys. It is the best thing ever. But people used to say to me things like when they were little, oh, boys will be boys. Boys will be boys. Man, the amount of times I wanted to smack somebody who said that in front of my children, I cannot even begin to tell you. First of all, the saying boys will be boys is not even true. Second of all, it's an excuse that we give to boys for acting like little sinful creatures that they are. And I did not fall for that. I'm sorry, but my boys are 100% boy, and they are going to be 100% men, which means they are not getting an excuse for having potty humor or for being rude or for being jumping off of the couch when we're supposed to be sitting and talking or jumping over pews in church. No, there is a time and a place to be active, and they are very active. I do not have the world's most unique boys in the entire universe, I'm telling you. But my premise when they were little was expectations of, no, you are men. I am not raising you to be a child. I'm raising you to be a man. And that's where we're going. And that's what we're going to focus on. And that's really the best way to help our middle schooler is to kind of get past our premises and say, you know what lies am I believing about middle school? Let's get rid of them. Let's get rid of all that baggage I bring into it and just say, what is the goal with my child? What is the goal for this person in front of me? This person is going to be a young lady. This person's going to be a mother someday, probably, or a father, or a leader, or a CEO, or they're going to join the army. Like, what is this person going to do? What is this person going to be as an adult? And you keep your eyes on that. And not only do you keep your eyes on it, but you help your middle schooler to kind of see that and go, that's what I want to become. That's what I want to become. So that they can see that end goal and they know where they should be focusing their attention, not on all of the struggles they're having in middle school, but on looking at that end goal and going, yes, that's what I'm going to be. That's what I'm going to be as an adult. That's what God's called me to be. So consider this. If they need to be looking towards that goal in the future, if they need to be looking towards adulthood and what they're going to be doing, and they're keeping their eyes on that, one of the greatest and easiest ways to do that is to have a mentor. To have somebody who's older than them, not necessarily you or your husband or your spouse, but someone else who comes alongside them, who's older than them, but not a lot older, but who is older than them, who can show them, this is what a young adult looks like. This is where you're going. Because it's really hard for them to look at their parents, however old they are, probably in their 30s, 40s, maybe even their 50s, and think that's where I'm going, because there's a huge gap there. But it's easier for them to look at somebody in college or in the upper end of high school and go, yes, that's what I'm going to be. Just a few years, just outside of that hump of middle school with all those hormones raging and all of that quick physical changes, somebody who's walking the path of righteousness, somebody who, they're not perfect, obviously, but somebody they can look at and go, yes, that's what I want to be like. That's what I want to be when I am in college. And that's one of the reasons why those college, and I just blanked on what they were called. There's all these great college ministries that come to college campuses and they lead college students in Bible studies and in worship and in really studying the word. And one of the reasons those are so successful is because the people who are running them are literally 2 or 3 years older than the people they're leading. They were just in it, and now they've graduated out of it, and now they've come back and they're working with these young adults, and the young adults look at it and go, you know what, in 3 years, I want to be like this person. I want to be like this person. And that's what mentorship is. As we get older, we can pick mentors who are much, much older than us. But at this moment, it's really helpful for them to see somebody in their adult years and go, oh yeah, that's what I want to be. The other thing to consider is the personality. I've really been having a blast learning about the Enneagram recently, but you've got Myers-Briggs, you've got the DISC assessment, you've got the Enneagram. There are so many, you can do 16 personalities, I think, .com to look at that information. There's so many different tools out there to kind of look at our personalities. And one of the biggest helps I've found is that the Enneagram specifically tells you about how you are triggered when we're dealing with stress. So for example, if you're a number 1 and you're starting to feel stressful, the trigger that you're starting to feel stress in the moment is that all of a sudden you feel like you alone can fix the problem, that nobody else can do it, and you've got essentially the burden of the entire world on your shoulders. It might have been just something, let's say the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. The room might have been totally fine yesterday, and then this morning you wake up and it's so full of stuff that all of a sudden you've got to clean it. It has to happen right now, and you're the only one who can do it right. That's a trigger for you to go, oh, wait a minute, this is not a healthy place for me to be. Let's back up. I need to go do something else. I need to figure out how to deal with this. And it does talk about that as well. So that has been really helpful to know that, I have a teenager who's a number 1. I have a young adult. We do not call him a teenager. a young adult who's a number 1. So he is being taught, oh, that's the trigger I'm looking for. I have another one who's a number 6. So when I'm working with him on his math and he starts to freak out, and the sign that he's freaking out is that he is convinced that he is the worst person at math in the entire world. Like he doesn't even deserve to be able to do it, even though he isn't enjoying it at the moment. I mean, the self-image that he has placed on himself when he's in an unhealthy place is so detrimental to his development. But now that we know it's there, and now that we know it's part of his personality, we just kind of stop and go, wait a minute, what lie are you telling yourself here? Let's combat that lie with the truth, because that's not true. What you just said is not true. Let's focus on the truth and let's move on, because that's not what God created you to do. And especially since, truthfully, he's really good at math. So I don't know what his problem is there. He just gets frustrated because he's a middle schooler. That's just what they do. So consider that. Look at mentors for your student. Look at personality traits. And what's really fun is if you do the personality stuff with your middle schooler, they usually get a real good kick out of it. They tend to enjoy it. So that's a lot of fun. I thought it'd be helpful for us to go through some behaviors, needs, actions that our kids have. So I just kind of analyzed some behaviors that I see often, and then what the actual need is that they're screaming out essentially, and what you can do about it. So for example, if they're scattered and they're messy, if they're just like their desk is a mess and they can't keep anything organized, they're just so spread out. What they really need is they need focus. They need an area where they can work, where there's not a lot of distractions, not a lot of noise, so they can keep their eye on the goal. That's what they really need. And how we can help them is we can help them by modeling good planning. We can help them by showing them how to put together a plan, a to-do list, a very clear, concise chart on what they need to be focusing on first and second and third, and then saying to them, you know what? Do you need a quiet place to read? I have one kid who needs it silent to read. I have another kid who likes to listen to music, instrumental music, and that's fine, but they clearly cannot read in the same room, right? They have to go somewhere else. So we work through those. We model those good planning, those discussions, not in the moment when they're stressed out about it, but before. And that's kind of why we have been using the student roadmap that we have at SKIO Academy, and I've been using it with 2 of my kids so far, and we're not done. It's a multi-week process where we start and we look at it and we think about it, and then we put it away and we let it kind of ruminate, then we come back to it later, that sort of thing. So we're always looking at that at a totally different time, not when we're stressed out. Frustration. If they're feeling really frustrated, really what they need is a friend, someone to relate with them. We've gone through a move, and my kids don't have a lot of friends right now, but they have me and they have each other. And so just stopping and saying, you know what, I know you're frustrated about your math right now, and you think you're the only one who deals with this problem, but you're totally not. You know what, it's okay. I understand what you feel. I've had this exact same experience here. And you share a similar experience, and then give them a hug. My 14, 15-year-old boys, they still want hugs. They might not say they want a hug, or maybe they do. Sometimes they do say that, but they still do, and they still need them. It's kind of like when, well, for me personally, when I get really mad at my husband, I go from wanting to punch him to just needing him to just give me a hug and tell me it's going to be okay. And that's a lot like our middle schoolers when they get really frustrated. Anger, especially in boys, anger is a behavior where frustration moves very quickly into anger, and that's when they need to run it out. Go run laps around the house, go get some of that energy out. And a lot of that is pent up hormones from developing, and they need to move. A lot of people say that it's really healthy for boys especially, and some girls to be involved in sports in these years, because they're able to work out some of those hormone changes in their body, and that helps them. Or to have a job, a physical job, like cleaning out a barn or going to work on a farm or something like that. It really helps them to clean out their system, essentially. Reservedness, that is going to their room and needing to be alone all the time. Now, some kids in this age, they do need to be alone more often than they did before. But if it's so much that they're not connecting with anybody else, that's really not healthy. And what they really need is a connection and a belonging. They need to feel like even though they're changing and they're a different person today than they were yesterday, they still belong as part of the family, that they still belong with this group of people who they live with. So this is when I usually take my kids on dates, on just one-on-one dates. It's usually impromptu. Sometimes I schedule it, especially if our schedule is so weird and wacky, I just cannot figure out how to do this. But other times right now, I'm going to Lowe's all the time. So I'll just grab one kid and say, you're going with me. And then on the way to Lowe's, we'll stop and get a cup of coffee together. Or I only have two kids who drink coffee. So, or we'll stop and get a donut, or we'll go do something and we'll be like, this is a date. We've discovered really cheap ways of just stopping and taking 15 minutes together and just doing something to just reiterate back to them and to communicate to them, you know what, you belong here with us. You are our family member. You are in this family, and nothing you ever do is going to change that. You're stuck with us, and that's okay. Um, Along those same lines, discontentment in the family. If they are discontent with, especially with siblings, a lot of that has to do with wanting to be independent. Like they're in that's that whole child and adult thing where purgatory, where they're in the middle. They want to feel like they belong to a family and have that security and that protection, but at the same time, they really want to do their own thing. They want to be more responsible. They want to have more freedom. They don't want to be treated like one of the little kids. And so we have to figure out that balance there between independence and being part of the family and being under the authority of the parents. And so in this area, what I do is I tend to give my kids more responsibility and freedom. And what it does is it communicates to my child, I trust you to be able to do this without me hovering over you. They have more independence in the sense that, something very similar or simple, sorry, going to the store and then just being like, yeah, you can walk around by yourself. Or we have our Target is like 3 storefronts down from a bookstore. So if my middle schoolers want to go to the bookstore, it's like, yeah, you guys can go to the bookstore together. You stay together, go to the bookstore, have fun. I'll see you when I'm done. Or come back here when you're done, because usually I'm longer than you are. Giving them a little bit more freedom kind of makes them feel more important. Like, okay, my parents do respect the fact that I'm going to be a man and that I have more freedom and that I am trustworthy and I'm being raised to be responsible and that I am responsible. So think of some things that you can do to help with that. So it's like walking a tightrope, because at one level, they still need hugs and they still need to feel like they're one of your kids and that you love them no matter what. And on another hand, they really need you to communicate to them that you see them as more than just a child, that they are on their way to adulthood, that you see them as almost an equal. Like taking your 14-year-old out for coffee, it's a very adult-like thing to do. And it's awesome because my husband doesn't drink coffee. So I can take my son out and we can have coffee together, and it just feels so special. Because we're sitting across the table from each other, we're drinking the same beverage that the little kids don't drink. It's very, very adult-like, and he loves it, and I love it. It's so much fun. We love both of it. It's all good. It's all good. And that's it. That's all I had for you. That seems like it was very abrupt. I think I talk fast. Sorry. So just kind of a recap here real quick on what we talked about. We talked about what middle school was. It's hard physically and emotionally. They're stuck in the middle. Why do we do middle school? Because we need that time to get ready for high school. We need that time to make decisions, learn how to make good decisions. We need that time to learn how to love each other. How do we help our student in middle school? We help them to see that we love them and that they are one of our family members, but that we do not see them as one of the children, but that we see them as one of the soon-to-be adults and equals, that they're coming into their own, and we're okay with that. All right. Does anybody have any questions? I know middle school is a roller coaster, but you really want to stick with it because seriously, the highs on this coaster are phenomenal. I just love this age. I love it. I mean, the lows are really annoying, but the highs, those moments when you get to look at your 13-year-old and they're reasoning like an adult, or they're making decisions that you're just like, yes, that's what it's all about. That is the best. That is the best. If I could have started my parenting years in 6th grade with all of my kids, I'd have way more than 5 children, because it is so great. I love this age. In high school. High school is awesome too. I love high school, but I love them starting in middle school where they're starting to wrestle with those things like, yeah, I'll argue with you all day long, dude, because this is awesome. I'm so there, and if you're struggling with that, get them into a debate class or something. Let them argue with other people. If you don't like to argue with them, then outsource it. That's your prerogative as a parent. And you'll see that on our chart of things that they needed, let's see, things they needed, none of them was they need to argue with you. None of them. They do need to argue, but they usually need to argue with themselves. And sometimes it comes out verbally, but it's not really against you. It's against what they've already been thinking about. And you can totally outsource that. All right, well, that's it. And it doesn't look like we have any questions. And that was super short. And I'm sorry about that. I need to learn to speak slower. I hope it was helpful. If you have any feedback whatsoever, feel free to email me. Here, I'll put it in the chat box because I always forget to put my email in the actual slide. You can go ahead and email me and ask questions there if you didn't have any here. And I hope it's been helpful. Like I said, if you are trying to get ready for high school and you're looking at this going, yes, I need to take my middle schooler and get ready for high school, feel free to go to the website right now. If you go to skioacademy.com/free, you can sign up and get our free high school planning guide that I just put together. I think it was last week. It's got some core suggestions of what you need to do to cover in high school. It's got grids to help you plan that out with your student. You can sit down with your student and say, you know what? Where do you want to go? Let's look at what classes you need to take in high school in order to accomplish the goals that you want to do.